the black-eyed children. I've often heard it said that the eyes are the windows to the soul. If that's true, then the children I encountered had no souls at all. My name is Alex, and I'm here to tell you about the night I came face to face with the black-eyed children, an experience that still haunts my every waking moment. It started on a crisp autumn evening. The wind howled outside my small suburban home, rattling the windows and stirring the fallen leaves. I had settled in for the night with a book and a cup of tea, trying to ignore the gnawing sense of unease that seemed to permeate the air. My dog, Max, usually a bundle of energy, lay silently at my feet, his ears perked up, eyes fixed on the front door. It was around 9 p.m. when I first heard the knock. It was a soft, almost hesitant sound, but in the silence of the night, it might as well have been a thunderclap. Max growled low in his throat, a sound I'd never heard him make before. I got up, heart pounding, and made my way to the door. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling more than I would have liked. There was no immediate response, just the howling wind and the rustle of leaves. I reached for the door handle, hesitating for a moment before finally pulling it open. Standing on my doorstep were two children, a boy and a girl, both no older than 10. They were dressed in simple, old-fashioned clothes that seemed out of place, like they had stepped out of a different era. But it wasn't their clothing that made my blood run cold. It was their eyes. Completely black, devoid of any whites or irises, just endless pools of darkness. "Can we come in?" the girl asked, her voice soft and eerily calm. "We're lost, and we need to use your phone." I should have slammed the door shut right then and there, but something about their presence was hypnotic, almost paralyzing. My mind screamed at me to turn them away, but my body seemed to have a will of its own. I stepped aside, allowing them to enter. As soon as they crossed the threshold, Max went berserk. He barked and snarled, lunging at the children with a ferocity I had never seen before. The boy and girl barely reacted, simply staring at him with those soulless eyes. I grabbed Max by the collar, dragging him into the kitchen, and shutting the door behind us. His barking continued, muffled by the walls, but I tried to calm myself. I turned back to the children, who stood motionless in the foyer. "The phone is in the living room," I said, my voice shaky. "Feel free to use it." They nodded in unison and walked into the living room, their movements unnaturally synchronized. I followed them, watching as the boy picked up the phone and began to dial. The girl turned to me, her black eyes boring into mine. "Thank you," she said. "We won't be long." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I wanted to ask where their parents were, why they were out alone at this hour. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I watched in silence as they huddled together, whispering into the receiver. Minutes passed, feeling like hours, and I could feel the oppressive weight of their presence growing stronger. The air seemed to thicken, making it hard to breathe. I wanted them out, needed them out, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Finally, the boy hung up the phone and turned to me. "Our parents are on their way," he said. "We'll wait outside." Relief washed over me, and I quickly ushered them to the door. As they stepped outside, the girl turned back, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thank you for your kindness," she said. "You'll be rewarded." I shut the door behind them, locking it with trembling hands. Max had stopped barking, but I could still hear his low growl through the kitchen door. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. It was over, I told myself. They were gone. But the sense of unease lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I checked the clock. 10 p.m. An hour had passed since their arrival, but it felt like a lifetime. I decided to check on Max, hoping his presence would calm me down. As I opened the kitchen door, Max bolted out, heading straight for the front door. He pawed at it, whining and barking, his eyes wide with fear. I tried to calm him down, but he refused to be soothed. In the end, I decided to let him outside, thinking maybe a quick run would help him burn off some of his agitation. I watched as he disappeared into the darkness, his barks growing fainter. I was about to close the door when I heard it, a whisper, soft and chilling, carried on the wind. "They're coming." I slammed the door shut, heart hammering in my chest. I checked all the locks, making sure every window was secure. I turned off the lights, plunging the house into darkness, hoping to hide from whatever was out there. I retreated to my bedroom, clutching my phone, debating whether to call the police. What could I tell them? That 2 children with black eyes had shown up at my door, and now I felt like I was being watched. They'd think I was crazy. Hours passed, and I must have dozed off at some point, because I was jolted awake by a loud crash. I grabbed my phone, the screen glowing eerily in the darkness. It was 3 a.m. I listened, straining to hear any sound, but the house was silent. Slowly, I crept out of bed, my heart pounding in my ears. I made my way down the hallway, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. As I approached the living room, I saw it. The front door was wide open, the cold night air flooding in. My first thought was of Max. Had he returned? I stepped outside, calling in his name, but there was no response. The street was empty, bathed in the pale glow of the streetlights. I turned to go back inside when I saw them, standing at the end of the driveway, the 2 children, their black eyes reflecting the light. "We need to come in," the girl said, her voice carrying on the wind. "Please let us in." Terror gripped me, and I backed away, shaking my head. "No," I managed to choke out. "You need to leave." Their expressions remained unchanged, unnervingly calm. "We need to come in," the boy repeated. "It's not safe out here." I turned and ran back into the house, slamming the door behind me. I fumbled with the locks, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I could hear them now, their soft whispers outside the door growing louder, more insistent. "Let us in. We won't hurt you. Let us in." I pressed my back against the door, trying to block out their voices. I had to think, had to find a way to get rid of them. I grabbed my phone, dialing the police with shaking hands. 911, what's your emergency? I tried to explain, my words tumbling out in a frantic rush. The operator assured me that officers were on their way, but it felt like a hollow promise. I knew deep down that they wouldn't arrive in time. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices pleading, demanding to be let in. I covered my ears, sinking to the floor, tears streaming down my face. I was trapped, alone and helpless, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, the noise stopped. The air grew still, the oppressive weight lifting. I cautiously removed my hands from my ears, listening. Silence. I waited, not daring to move, until I heard the distant wail of sirens. The police arrived, finding me huddled by the door, exhausted and terrified. I tried to explain what had happened, but my story sounded insane, even to me. They searched the area, but found no sign of the children, no footprints, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. In the days that followed, I tried to piece my life back together. I changed the locks, installed security cameras, and kept Max close by my side. But the fear never left me. Every night I found myself listening for that soft knock, dreading the return of those black-eyed children. I read everything I could find about them, discovering countless stories similar to mine. Encounters with these eerie, soulless children, always ending in terror and tragedy. Those who let them in often suffered dire consequences: illness, accidents, even death. I realized how lucky I was to have survived, but I knew that luck could only hold out for so long. Even now, as I sit here writing this, I can feel their eyes on me, watching, waiting. I don't know what they are or where they come from, but I do know one thing. They'll be back. And next time, I might not be so fortunate. So, if you ever hear a knock on your door late at night, and you find 2 children standing there with pitch black eyes, heed my warning. Do not let them in. No matter how much they plead or how harmless they seem, keep your door shut. Your life may depend on it. The creepy clown statue. When I think back to that night, my skin still prickles with unease. It was a seemingly ordinary Saturday evening when my parents decided to have a rare night out, leaving me and my younger brother, Timmy, in the care of a new babysitter named Emma. They had only met her once through a neighbor's recommendation, and she seemed friendly enough, her smile wide and genuine, her eyes kind. Little did we know, that night would etch an unsettling memory in our minds forever. Emma arrived promptly at 7, her cheerful demeanor instantly putting Timmy at ease. My parents gave her the usual rundown: emergency contacts, bedtime routines, and a warning about the old house's occasional creaks and groans. I was 13 then, old enough to think I didn't need a babysitter, but young enough that my parents didn't trust me alone with my 5-year-old brother. Before they left, my mother pulled Emma aside, her voice low but serious. "One more thing," she said, glancing toward the living room. "If the kids get scared, just cover the clown statue with a blanket. Sometimes it unnerves them." I hadn't noticed the clown statue before, or perhaps it had blended so seamlessly into the room's quirky decor that I hadn't paid it any mind. But as soon as my mother mentioned it, I felt a chill. I looked towards the living room, and there it was, tall and gangly, its painted smile stretched impossibly wide, eyes fixed in an eternal, glassy stare. Its red hair flared out in wild tufts, and its garish costume looked faded and worn, like it had been part of the house for decades. Emma nodded, seemingly unperturbed, and my parents left, their laughter and chatter fading into the evening air as the door closed behind them. The evening started peacefully. Emma was great with Timmy, engaging him with stories and games while I lounged in the den, half watching TV and half listening to their playful banter. The house was old, with a rich history and plenty of character. Its wooden beams and vintage wallpaper told stories of a bygone era, and the large, sash windows looked out over a garden that seemed to stretch endlessly into the dark. As the night wore on, the house settled into a familiar pattern of creaks and groans, the old pipes clanking occasionally, a soft wind rustling through the trees outside. Timmy and Emma moved to the living room, and I followed, feeling an inexplicable need to be close to them. Emma had just started reading a bedtime story when Timmy's eyes flickered toward the clown statue. "Emma, can we cover the clown?" he asked, his voice small and nervous. Emma looked at the statue, her expression curious but not frightened. "Of course," she said, grabbing a blanket from the couch and draping it over the statue. It looked oddly more menacing, shrouded in darkness, a vague shape hulking in the corner. Timmy seemed satisfied, though, and Emma continued reading until his eyes drooped and he drifted off to sleep. I helped Emma carry Timmy upstairs and tuck him into bed. As we tiptoed out of his room, Emma whispered, "Is he always this scared of clowns?" I shrugged, trying to hide my own unease. "I guess so. I never really noticed the statue until tonight." We returned to the living room, and I could sense Emma was still curious about the statue. "Do you know where it came from?" she asked. "No idea," I replied. "It was here when we moved in." Emma frowned, glancing at the covered figure. "It just seems out of place." I couldn't disagree. The rest of the house had a charming, if antiquated, aesthetic. The clown, on the other hand, felt wrong, like it didn't belong in our world. I shook off the thought, attributing it to the eerie quiet of the night. Around 10, Emma suggested we watch a movie. We settled on a light-hearted comedy, hoping to dispel the unsettling atmosphere that seemed to have crept in. But even as we laughed, my eyes kept drifting back to the statue, its outline visible under the blanket. Something felt off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Halfway through the movie, the power suddenly cut out. The house was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the windows. Emma and I sat in stunned silence for a moment, the room eerily quiet. "I'll check the fuse box," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The fuse box was in the basement, a place I rarely ventured into, especially at night. Emma offered to come with me, but I insisted she stay upstairs in case Timmy woke up. Armed with a flashlight, I made my way to the basement. Each step creaked loudly, the sound echoing in the confined space. The basement was cold and damp, the air thick with a musty smell. I found the fuse box, and after a few fumbling attempts, managed to restore the power. As I headed back upstairs, I heard a strange noise, a soft, almost imperceptible giggle. I froze, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. It was coming from the living room. I crept up the stairs, my flashlight beam dancing across the walls. As I reached the top, I saw Emma standing in the living room doorway, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "What's wrong?" I whispered, my voice trembling. She pointed toward the clown statue. The blanket had slipped off, revealing its grinning face once more. But something was different. Its head had turned slightly, and its eyes seemed to follow us. "I didn't touch it," Emma said, her voice shaking. "I swear, I didn't." We stared at the statue, our hearts pounding. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with a sense of dread. Suddenly, the statue's mouth moved. A low, raspy voice emerged, almost a whisper. "Why are you here?" We screamed, stumbling back in terror. The clown statue stepped down from its pedestal, its movements jerky and unnatural. It was no longer just a statue. It was alive. Emma grabbed my hand and we bolted upstairs to Timmy's room, locking the door behind us. Timmy woke up, his eyes wide with fear as he saw our panicked faces. "What's happening?" he cried. Emma tried to calm him down while I pushed a dresser in front of the door. The house was silent again, but we could hear faint footsteps moving slowly, deliberately through the hallway. "We need to call the police," I whispered, reaching for my phone. But there was no signal, no connection to the outside world. Minutes felt like hours as we huddled together, waiting for the nightmare to end. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped right outside the door. We held our breath, listening to the eerie silence. Then, a soft knock echoed through the room. "Let me in," the voice whispered. Timmy clung to Emma, his face buried in her shoulder. I grabbed a lamp, the only weapon I could find, and stood ready to defend my family. The doorknob rattled, then stopped. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated, and the house fell silent once more. We waited, too scared to move, until the first light of dawn seeped through the window. Only then did we dare to leave the room. The living room was empty, the clown statue back on its pedestal, its eyes staring blankly ahead. The blanket was neatly folded at its feet. There was no sign of forced entry, no indication that anything unusual had happened. But we knew the truth. When my parents returned, they found us huddled together on the couch, exhausted and shaken. We told them everything, but they were skeptical, attributing it to our overactive imaginations and the creepy atmosphere of the old house. We never spoke of that night again, but the clown statue remained. My parents refused to get rid of it, despite our pleas. They believed it was just a harmless piece of decor, a relic of the house's past. But we knew better. We knew the statue wasn't just a statue. It was something far more sinister, something that watched and waited in the dark corners of our home. And every time I walk past it, I can still feel its eyes on me, a silent reminder of the terror we faced that night. Years later, after we moved away, I heard stories about the house, rumors of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, and the eerie clown statue that seemed to come to life. I never went back, but the memory of that night stays with me, a chilling reminder of the horrors that can hide in plain sight. Now, as I tell this story, I can only hope that whoever lives there now understands the true nature of the clown statue and the dark presence that lurks within. And I pray they never have to experience the terror we endured on that unforgettable night. Hey, if the stories resonate with you, consider liking and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss future episodes.